Hello and welcome to my live stream on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern. We live stream every Tuesday and Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern time. So please join me as we live stream and feel free to ask questions in the comments. I will answer them as I go on, and they can be off tangent, but I always like to have questions about Spiritism and some aspect about Spiritism in your life and relationship to the spirits. Before we begin, please subscribe, hit the bell, hit the like button. All this will help us with the algorithm for YouTube, and we will be able to spread Spiritism far and wide throughout the English-speaking world. And I really appreciate everyone who listens to us here or to myself here on this YouTube channel. So I'm Brian Foster, and I welcome you to tonight. We're talking about, again, the officer and the library in hell. So remember where we were with the officer before. He had died, and he was a very smart and focused man, but he wasn't a very nice or spiritual man. He got what he wanted, and he would do anything to get what he wanted. And as he died, he went to the lower zone, and he made himself superior over other people. Then he proved himself too bad to stay in the lower zone, as we say. The lower zone is from the crust of the earth up to the levels of heaven. He went down to the dark abyss, or as we call hell. Of course, as I said before, there is no permanent eternal punishment. It's all how you change your character and your attitude. Now, those people down there may think it's eternal. That's kind of the punishment part. But it's not. It's when you change your character and your outlook. Of course, this is what has happened to the officer. So he went down into lower in hell. He took over like a generalship of part of a city. He took over part of a city. Then he wanted to, destroy more lives on the earth by, melding with bodies and so forth. He did that. And of course, this good spirit said, no, you're going further down. He went further down. He was then whipped by gangs of, even more hellish demons. And then he went down even further. Now, finally, he started thinking about God and thinking about praying. And then he escaped. He went up to level, and he went back to where those people who hurted him and whipped him, and he escaped them. He then went into a cave, and then he was captured again and tortured. Now, this is where we will now start his story so far. So, first, observe that every time he got into a bad situation before, what he did is he tried to find a way to make himself in charge of the bad people around him. And of course, what the spirit world is all smart and encompassing, right? They're just geniuses. This is how they put us through trials on earth. Let me go here and I'll carry back that thought. So instead of instead of having him be with people, they put him all by himself in this dark area, very dark area. And that's really what finally he started thinking about praying and being better, because he thought, okay, how have I landed up here? Well, every time I was with evil people, I tried to outdo them in evil and doing bad and hurting other people. And so finally the spirit world said, okay, well, we'll just put you by yourself. What do you think about that? You can't be better than anybody else. There's only you. And so that's when he finally started thinking and started talking about praying, and he started climbing up. And it's the same way when people ask, they go, how can I atone for my past wrongs when I don't know what I did? And that is the genius of the spirit world, is they know how to make you analyze your actions in the course of giving you stimuli and trials and tribulations, even though you don't know what you did wrong, but they'll still put you through certain situations to make you a better person. Now, let me give you an example. I'll use myself as an example. I was told that I had been in charge of people, and that I was more focused on getting money for myself, stealing money from the people I was in charge of, than helping the people. And therefore, in my current life, when I ever got money, not a lot for a lot of people, 6-figure severance payments, right? When companies I worked for were bought or whatever. But every time I got that, big pot of money, I didn't drink it away or use drugs, but somehow I was inspired to make the wrong investment in the stock market, and therefore it always went away, right? And I always lost it all. And at first, it just killed me. I just, I'm sure you can imagine how horrible you think when you lose that once in a lifetime. And I did it twice in a lifetime chances, right? Two companies I worked for in pretty high positions were bought. And of course, I had good severance packages. Well, of course, they were all gone. And finally, I just said, okay, I can live without it. I can live within my means. I'm not going to worry about it. I put it behind me. And of course, then, and when I became a spiritist, and I was in spiritist meetings, and I had a psychograph message that that I had done what I said I did, as far as taking advantage of other people. I felt, okay, now I understand. It's just, I can't let money be that high of a priority in my life. As long as I can do better and I can get along okay, I don't have to have a new car, right? I don't have to have the biggest house. I'm fine. And in fact, that's what I did, because through my career, I went up the ladder, and I was like a vice president in a not a huge company, $100 million company. But when I got further up there, I just felt worse and worse, because you have, of course, everybody knows is that you have to drink the Kool-Aid, right? You have to put, as you know what rolls downhill. So when you're told to do something, you have to tell your people to do it, and you have to conform to their ideas. And the more you slavishly conform to their ideas, the better your chance of promotion and all sorts of other political games. I couldn't stand it anymore. So finally, I just stopped that. I went down to middle management. I didn't even like that. I didn't like being in charge of people and making them drink the Kool-Aid. And finally, I just became an individual contributor, and I became much happier. And this is all really before I found Spiritism. But then when I found Spiritism, it all made sense to me. So the long, I gave you a long story for a short answer, is that you will be given stimuli to make you analyze your actions and say, oh, I don't think that's a good idea. So if you analyze, and if you really reflect on your trials and tribulations, you can figure out what you've done in past lives. If you had a significant other, or a spouse or whatever, just give you the worst divorce in the world, just, you know what I mean, then most probably you did that to someone before. And instead of coming out of that experience saying, oh, next time I'm just going to do that twice as much to the next person, no, what you should say to yourself is, okay, that really hurt me. That was unfair. And I would never do that to another person. And if you can think that way, then you have successfully gone through your trials, and you won't have to go through those trials again. People ask, well, why do these trials have to be so, horrible? Well, because most probably you were given very subtle trials and you ignored it. And therefore, okay, it's like you do a kid, right? If they don't learn the lesson, you got to kind of make it a little more intense, right? Each time. Well, same thing happens in the spirit world with us. If we ignore it or learn the wrong thing from it, it becomes more intense. So, instead of a little kind of like, hello, it's more like a slap on the wrist, right? To get your attention, not to hurt you, but just to get your attention so you can learn from it. One thing I want to make sure everybody knows: the spirit world and God and Jesus never punishes us. They don't punish us to inflict pain for pain's sake. We will go through pain, what we think is punishment, but it actually is for our edification, for us to learn. Now, let me get into the story proper. So this is what the officer said. The men who captured me beat me thoroughly to show you who is master, as they said. I remember how I had often done the same and tried to resist, but found that some subtle change had come over me. It was not exactly that my will had grown weaker, but my will to do evil had grown weaker. I was therefore at a great disadvantage in trying to protect myself. The law, of course, was self-acting, but at the same time it tended to make me progress, for it rendered life very miserable and begot a longing to escape. For a long time I struggled in the grasp of my captors, enduring all manners of tortures, but at length I got my opportunity and escaped. My tormentor started in pursuit, but though my will to do evil was weakened, yet my will to escape was strengthened. If anything, I quickly outdistanced them. So let's talk about that. When he said, my will to do evil had grown weaker. So when you had in spiritual literature, you'll see these people in charge of these cities and camps or whatever, and gangs, kind of like a mafia organization. They were usually kind of pretty big, kind of ugly looking, but they were very powerful because they had powerful wills, and their focus to being mean to other people and being dominating other people was strong. But when you start letting that good side, because every one of these, these poor souls in the lower zone and the dark abyss, which he calls hell, there's always good and bad in everybody. And once you start letting that good, you don't have that force of will to do evil to someone, to do bad to someone. You're starting to control that, and that's reflecting in the fact that you may not appear as large, right? You actually appear in the lower zone and the dark abyss. You start appearing as you think you should appear. So at one time, the officer probably seemed very large and menacing. He now became more normal. He became, a nicer person. Of course, that is a disadvantage in the lower zone, in the dark abyss where he was. So he was running from them. He goes, I rushed along in the darkness over a stony plain. For what seemed like weeks and weeks, hardly meeting a soul, and those few I met I avoided. At last I stumbled up against which appeared to be a huge building. After a little reconnoitering, I discovered it was a library. I was at once struck with an idea. There now seemed a hope, a faint yet ever present, that I should ultimately escape from hell. If that were so, I out in the interest of science to explore it as far as possible. I determined, therefore, not without a great deal of trepidation, to enter the building. He says, you have been hearing about libraries in the realm above this, which is in the heavenly realms. Nor was it entirely by accident that I should speak of similar subject at about the same time. The one is a natural corollary to the other. So they talked about libraries in heaven, where the books, you touch a book and you can understand the book. You can understand the author of how he wrote the book. It can be an audio visual 3D experience. That all depends on the book. And in fact, the great Brazilian medium, Francisco Chico Xavier, when I always used to call him Chico Xavier, who died in 2002. He had so much power. He could read minds, and he could put his hand on a book, like amazing too. He would know what the book was about. He would know what the mood of the author when he wrote the book, all that. So that shows you the power of people who are really high spiritual. So having entered the library, I was met by an evil-looking old man. You understand, he looked old and very evil. I went to look over the library. He goes, I want to look over the library, I began. He goes, certainly, my son. The library is much patronized by the wise. Those who would triumph in hell must study even as they do on earth. Is that not so? Of course. Is this library restricted to the subject of hate, or are there other subjects, such as lust, included? Oh, he said, mainly hate and cruelty, although a little lust, of course, has to be included. But lust as lust goes, go to its own library, and there are the cities of lust. You should go there and study a little. It's worth it. We then entered the library. It was an enormous place and was divided into three. So this is the library in hell, or what we call the dark abyss. Number one, book forms. Number two, idea books. And number three, living thought visualizations. So he said, among the forms were all books dealing with cruelty and hate for their own sake. I saw their shelves filled with the records of the Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition, books describing method of poisoning your foals, books relating hideous crimes and savage tortures, histories of torture, so-called medical works, and so on. I looked at one of these medical works. What decides whether a book comes to hell or not? For example, this book is on vivisection. It's a French work. Do all books on that subject come here? And the librarian replied, no, indeed. It's all a case of the object of work and also of the results it produces. With all books on vivisection, as with the thing itself, both object and result count. For example, he believed he had a cure for some disease. A doctor inoculates some animals with the disease, tries his treatment, and afterward publishes an account of his experiments. The sole object of that man has been to improve the well-being of his fellow men, and that book has that object. In such a case, of course, we should not get his book. But many men, especially on the continent, inflict tortures on animals simply out of a morbid curiosity to see how pain works. As no useful object is served by these experiments, and the publication of them only incites others to do likewise, the books come here, and so naturally do their authors. So, think about what he said. It's the object, it's the intention of the book. And this, again, we're told over and over that that it's the intention that counts, right? It's what you want. Notice we have a question here. So I like the word of Jesus in Christianity, but I don't believe in the Messiah stories in holy books. So that's a great one, and and no one says you have to, right? But let's talk about that just for a second when we're talking about books in the spirit world. Is in fact what we're told, and this is why, like many things in the Old Testament and even the New Testament and other writings and in Buddhism and so forth, seem a bit strange and cruel, right? Because what we're told is when the spirit world talks to us here on earth, they talk to us in what we can understand, in light of the culture and the scientific technological progress of the day. So if you think about the Old Testament, when it was very directive, you do this or you're going to be punished. Go to that city, kill everybody, right? Not nice things. But that was befitting the people at the time. They, to them, an eye for an eye, all that type of stuff, and they were not, they weren't raised in a culture of being nice, right? Then you think of the New Testament, and when they talk about Jesus, and even then there's things against homosexuality and that. Well, if Jesus talked about that, you should love everyone, no matter what gender and how specific that was, what they wanted to be, I should say, then people wouldn't have understood. They wouldn't have listened to anything else he said. Now, if you go to Allan Kardec's The Spirits book, when he asked about how do spirits come back, they said spirits come back in either gender, male or female. And later question, they go, okay, what about divorce? Now, remember, the Spirits book was a communication to different mediums to organized by Allan Kardec, the great codifier of Spiritism in the 1850s. Most countries there, divorce not allowed. They said, what about divorce? Do people have to stay together? And the answer was, well, that's your problem. That's your law. That's not God's or divine's law. So no, So what they said is, in essence, and it said, then they asked, what's marriage? And they said, a marriage is between two spirits. So a lot of these stories, what the spirit world tells us is that in these writings, in more older ancient times, is the messages of love and fraternity and charity are eternal. Everything else was pointed to the people at the time. So I hope that just gives you a little bit of knowledge of that, or the explanation. But of course, you don't have to believe anything you don't want to believe. There's no down. All Spiritism wants you to do is try to be as good a person as you like to be. So then he said. So anyway, it's the object, it's the intention of the book. If the book was written to be just cruel and mean, and that was the intention of the author, was just to write a book, like the Marquis de Sade, right? Then that book has probably ended up in hell. So then the officer said, well, I take it that most vivisectionists come here. And he said, oh, yeah, we get quite a large number, but not as many as you would expect. A good many of these men, although they seem a bit callous and are so, yet are genuinely moved by laudable, though often mistaken motives. But still a very large number would come to us if it were not for the time they spend on the astral plane. You see, they usually fall victims to the vengeance of the animals they have tormented, and this, in a clearer vision of the truth, causes them to regret what they have done and leads them to strive to make amends. How? The officer said. Oh, by encouraging men on earth to found societies for the prevention of cruelty to animals and such nonsense. Still, the so-called cause of science sends us many companions. And then he asked, well, how are scientists arranged for it? Oh, in different ways. Take the doctors, for example. We have a hospital not far from the library. A hospital? The officer cried with surprise. Yes, but we don't make any pretense of running it for the good of the patients. It's all done in the interest of science. But you ought to go around and see it for yourself. That is, if you're not afraid of being operated on yourself. We wandered into the second section, and here I saw the idea books. Each contained pictures instead of writings, and they were similarly devoted to cruelty, hate, and so forth. Every ingenious device for torturing the human body, and even the spiritual body, was displayed. Nor was there, for there was diabolical, clever ways of tormenting the mind. But the third section was the worst. Here at the sides of the room were countless pictures in which we could see the anguish of the victims as he or she was slowly tortured, while at the two ends of the room were stages upon which were enacted various diabolical torments. All of these were acted before us. The attendant said, "These rooms are devoted to works which describe the best ways to torture persons and the exact effects of any particular kind of torture, or as we call it, operation. You see, we cannot here inflict pain unless we understand the effect of that pain. Thus, the more fully we understand a particular torment, the easier it is to make another suffer that pain if we are strong-willed enough to subdue him." So let's talk about that. We can't inflict pain unless we understand the effect of that pain. So why did he say that? Well, a good reason. In the spirit world, the mind is everything. You don't have, and you have a paraspiritual body. So you know, the body, they can chop your legs off, chop your feet off, and it will come and meld together again. You are an immortal spirit. You cannot die. And you could be tortured in hell, just as this officer was, and he tortured other people. And if the victim thought in his mind he's not feeling pain, he wouldn't feel pain, well, then he would not feel pain. That's just the way it is, because everything is in your mind. Thought is action in the spirit world. So they have to understand a particular torment. In fact, in the past one we talked about where they were having wars, and they had like cannons and bullets, but then other people had spears, where the people who had died and gone to hell when there were no gunpowder, if a bullet was shot at them and shot through them, they wouldn't even feel it because they had no concept of the bullet. So what would have to be done, there'd be someone who would have to know enough to shoot a bullet at that person, and in their mind, put a vision in their mind of a bullet going through and ripping out the insides of their body. And that vision would cause them mental pain, and then they'd feel pain. And this is, of course, is what they're talking about here, is these bad spirits, I should say ignorant spirits. No one's bad forever. They'll all get better. Could take a long time, but they'll all get better eventually. They will have to, if they torture someone, then they'll have to say, okay, what kind of pain will they feel? Then they'll have to put that type of pain into that person's mind. So the act of torturing won't hurt them, but it's the vision and it's the mental communication from the dominant spirit to the weaker spirit that will cause them pain. And of course, just to let everybody know, if a high spirit came down and they couldn't do anything to a higher spirit. The higher spirit, if the higher spirit let themselves be seen, because they are such a less dense and they wouldn't even be seen at first. So if a high spirit came down and let himself be denser and be seen, no one in this lower zone, right, the dark abyss, could stand a chance. Just like an adult fighting a kindergartner. There's just so far above. There's nothing you can do. So then the officer said, I was getting a bit squeamish, so I had to leave. So then he says, well, after a while, I left the library, and crossing a barren waste, and I came to the so-called hospital. If the library had been gruesome, this place was a perfect nightmare. I passed through a gateway and entered a large but dirty hall. This is rather different to a hospital on Earth, I thought. There, they usually carry the case for cleanliness almost too far. The dirty hall led into an operating theater, and I saw on that table a man stretched out. He was fashioned in such a way he could not move, but otherwise appeared perfectly normal. The doctor began some fearfully painful operation on one of the nerve centers. The shrieks of the victims and the ghoulish delight of the audience was more than I could stand. Hardened sinner as I was, I therefore slipped out and found myself in the dissecting room. Here, living men, yes, and women were being dissected. As soon as one mangled body was left, it began to assume its original form again. As soon as this was noticed, another operation would begin upon it once more. So as I said, you cannot kill, you cannot be killed. So if you have a body, you'll if you're that poor woman victim and they see you chopping your hand off, you think your hand's off, but then when you kind of lose your mind, or you're unconscious, your hand will then reappear, right? It's impossible for you to die. He says, I noticed a woman was being dissected by a young doctor, pleading desperately with him to let her go. He hesitated for a moment, but a sharp word of reproof from an older man who was at work on a neighboring table hardened his heart, and he recommenced his work. I stepped up to him. He said, who is this woman? Why do you torture her so? Has she done you some wrong? And he replied, I know nothing about her or why she is here. You can ask her yourself if you like. So I turned to her, and she, reprieved for a moment, said, my name was Nini, and I lived in Paris. I was a demonadaine. I don't know what that is. I don't know what a demonadaine was in French, and was for 3 years the mistress of a Jew. One day he caught me in intrigue with a young actor, and there he turned me out of the house, beating me black and blue. I was furious and swore I would be revenged on both of them and on my cowardly lover, who instead of defending me had run like a rabbit. It was not long before I got my opportunity. I fell in with the leader of a band of Apaches. He was a rather handsome, gentlemanly man in looks. I think Apache were those type of dancers, the Apache dancing in France a long time ago, and did not belong to the class of ordinary Apache. He was awfully cunning rascal and absolutely ruthless. I told him the man I'd lived with had a lot of money hidden in the house and egged him on to break in. One night the band did so, and I went with them. The old guy was rather an old miser and had only one servant, a man who slept in, besides a woman who came in each day. The house was a decayed place in one of the suburbs of Paris. One of the band knocked the manservant senseless, and then we rushed into the man's bedroom, tied and gagged him. Now, I was almost sure that he kept practically all his money at the bank, but I wanted my revenge, so I swore to my new lover that it was hidden somewhere in the house. You must make him tell you, I cried, and I shook my fist in the old man's face. They pulled the gag out of his mouth, and someone put a dagger against his throat. Tell us where your gold is hidden, hissed Gaston. It's all in the bank except 200 francs, which are in the top drawer of the bureau downstairs. Liar, cried I. You know there's over 25,000 francs hidden in the house. And he said, my God, is that you, Nini? It is, you pig, I replied, and here I am to have my revenge. So you'd better tell us where the money is at once, or you'd be sorry you ever met me. He goes, I am that now, he began. He goes, but then Nini interrupted. You beast, take that. And I scratched his face as hard as I could. He began to yell, and Gaston at once plugged his mouth. He goes, well, we've wasted enough time. Bring up that charcoal fire. And several of the band, including myself, seized him and pushed his naked feet into the hot embers. Some held them firmly there, while others blew charcoal till it burned like a furnace. The old man writhed and struggled, but no sound came from his lips. He was far too securely gagged. At length, Gaston said, now we'll try again. And he took the gag from his mouth. He said, where is it? He goes, it's in the bank. I wish to heaven it was here. Then you would not torture me. For God's sakes, let me go. But then Gaston was madder than ever, and he said, do you think he's speaking the truth? And the woman said, no, lies. Back then to the fire, the torturer recommenced. Suddenly, one of the band who had been watching to see what we were not disturbed rushed into the room. Quick, someone has given the alarm. And there was a stampede, some going through the door, others out of the window, and I seized Gaston's arms. You fool, I shouted. Are you going to leave him alive to give evidence? We shall be caught if you do. You're right, my dear, he replied, and turning back cut his throat, the old man's throat. So she caused this old guy, who she was a mistress to, she caused him to be tortured and murdered. We escaped, but not long after, Gaston knifed me one night when he was drunk, and in due course I arrived here. Now you understand why I'm in this awful room. He goes, aren't you sorry for what you did to your old boyfriend? He goes, sorry, not I. It's the one thing that consoles me. But I wish to hell I could get out of this place. So here she is. She wasn't sorry at all that she murdered her old boyfriend because he kicked her out. Now, one would think that when one dies and you find yourself in a hellish place, you would start analyzing what you did wrong and think, okay, how do I get out of here? Was I here because I did bad things? Now, this is the same story, and I've said this before, but I'll repeat it real quick. Is when I've been to mediums meetings, and we've been to mediums meeting where in spiritist centers where they'll help spirits on the lower zone, and maybe they're from even below, depending on what the spirit manager wants to bring to the meeting, and they'll help them by having them talk through a medium, um, the trance medium, and then a consoling medium will talk to that spirit through the trance medium, so they can try to help them become a better person and help them look up to the light instead of thinking about revenge and hurting someone. So I was there. I'm not a medium. I was in the back of the room, and this trance medium all of a sudden said, "Zika, Zika, Zika." And the consoling medium said, "How can I help you?" He goes, "Zika," because I died of Zika. And it's like, okay, that's horrible. Oh, it is horrible because I didn't want to die of Zika. I wanted my neighbor to die of Zika. I hate her. And he goes, well, but hate doesn't do you any good. He talked about that, talked about the need for forgiveness and love. And then she said, what? Because I still want her to die of Zika. So here's a person, another example, locked in the lower zone, not happy, right? And yet they still want revenge. They still want, to do harm to other people. And that's something, and this is why Jesus said, forgive 70 times 7. This hate and this thirst, these primitive emotions, I should say, is what keeps us to the earth. It keeps us materially attached. So if you let these harmful emotions, rule you instead of you rule them, it's going to be hard to ascend. And this is where Spiritism has helped me so much. It's understanding that we're here on earth to rip out our primitive emotions and replace them with love and understanding, charity, and fraternity. And in all the episodes you go through, and I know they can be dramatic and they can be painful, and you can say, why in the heck is this happening to me? It all has a reason to make you a better person, to eventually make you a perfect spirit. And here we have the story of a woman who's being tortured, and yet, she knows why she's there. Now she said, now you understand why I'm in this awful room, but she's not sorry because she's still glad she murdered and tortured the other guy. So you can see, this is why spirits tell us that it's much better and more efficient to change your attitude and your character in this physical universe, because you have all these stimuli coming at you, where in your spirit universe, you're given your free will. So you're like this young lady, this is, your free will, go where you want to in hell or the dark abyss. And we're not going to force you. Now, if you sit and you say, please God, help me, you will be given help. And just as the officer was, he was, right now he's getting a little bit of incentive, right? And intuition, but, it's a lot harder to change your character and attitude in the spirit world. So that's why you should do it here. So then the officer said, okay. I said, well, now, I said, what pleasure do you find in torturing her? He talked to the young doctor. It's true she's ugly now. Her wickedness had made her so. Still, she is a woman, and she has done you no harm. Why do you do it? And he replied, will you take her place? He goes, not I. But still, that's rather different from torturing her when she's done you no harm. What pleasure do you get out of it? Pleasure, the doctor said, I don't get any pleasure out of it. At first, we do feel a kind of fiendish pleasure in seeing others suffer. Moreover, for a time, the more wretched we grow, the more we like to compel others to feel wretched. But after a time, this mockery of a pleasure ceases, and we go on doing this sort of thing mechanically. We don't feed any pity or sorrow, or feel any pity or sorrow for our victims, such feelings were dead in our hearts years before we died. And moreover, they don't deserve pity. They've all been about as cruel as we are. But we feel no pleasure in doing it. It's hollow. It's a hollow, joyless world here. Whatever you try to do to pass the time. Time. Damn it, there's no such thing here as time. And as he spoke, he turned away from me and savagely plunged a scalpel into the poor wretch who lay on the slab before him. I began to walk out of the room, but almost at once I was seized by 3 or 4 scientists. This fellow will do in place of the one that's escaped, shouted one. No, you don't, I cried out. But in spite of my desperate endeavors, they dragged me to the slab and fashioned me down as they had formerly fashioned him who escaped. Then I underwent the most fearful torture, but all the while I kept my wits about me and watched for an opportunity to get away. Before long it came. Two of the doctors started quarreling. Now, he was tortured. So again, this poor officer is getting what he gave. I called to the doctor for help and made a dash for the door. One or two tried to stop me, but most paid no heed. Such scenes were constantly occurring. Soon I was through the door and out again on the desolate plain, running for all I was worth. After a while, as I found I was not pursued, I slackened my speed and began to think over my experiences. One point especially struck me then and has impressed me ever since, and that was in hell. It is extremely difficult to get spirits to combine and work together for any common object, at any rate for any considerable period. Had there been any effectual combination among the doctors, I could never have escaped. It seemed quite easy for a few of them to unite for a moment to make me prisoner. But this done, most forgot all about me and started on something else. They were continually quarreling amongst themselves, and even while I was there, I saw more than one scientist placed on the dissecting slab by some of his companions. Indeed, the only time when effective united action was possible was in such cases as my own conquest of Paris of the Revolution, where a man with an iron will was able to dominate and force a large number of others to obey him. It was, yes, the entire absence of the power of voluntary combination for any one object is one of the characteristics of hell. So then the officer got up and walked out of the room, and that's all I'm going to go about today. Now, I just had a question, is what do you think about Jürgen Zyway's astral projection stories? So I do not know about that person's astral projection stories. I can tell, if you've ever read the works by Emanuel Swedenborg, and when he went into parts of heaven and parts of the lower zone, astral projection means you're going into other planes of existence. And so, I believe in astral projection. People can do that because, after all, we are composed. Let me show you what we're composed of. So this will help explain how things work. Let me bring this picture up. So why do we go to the spirit world? Why can't we astral project? And why do we go to the spirit world when we're asleep? So us here on this physical plane, we're composed of three components: the spirit, which is immortal, which always is with us, the perispirit, and the physical body. Now, the physical body I'm talking about is the body that we are here now in this physical universe on this physical earth. The perispirit is the connection between the physical body and the spirit. The spirit contains all of our memories, contains everything. So therefore, when I was younger, I was like, oh my God, I hope I don't get shot in the head or some car accident and I, come out a complete, changed person and I can't think straight. You don't have to worry about that because your brain, everything is always really, all your memories, your past life memories are there in your spirit. But your physical brain just may not work very well. It's like when you're a kid, right? You're still got when you're a child, your brain's not mature. You still have all this knowledge and memory in your spirit brain, but as it goes and connected to your body through your perispirit, it's hard to send messages to a brain that is not very advanced. But that's why a lot of smaller children have these memories of past lives and other things, because these leak in there and they have an open, loving heart. They just start, they have that connection. And the way the perispirit works is the perispirit covers your body like a diving suit, and yet it connects to every cell in your body. Now, when you sleep, your spirit, your perispirit actually leaves your body, and it can do astral projection, or you don't have to sleep. You can relax. The people who know how to do that can do that, and you can go into the lower zone. You can go into parts of heaven, but you can only go where the level of your spirituality allows you. So someone like Emanuel Swedenborg went into some levels of heaven. And of course he was, unless you're taken by a spirit, they can take you anywhere you want, depending on the level of the spirit. Now, the other thing is people will notice that, and I've seen with NDEs, they'll notice that when they leave their body, but they're still alive, they'll see a thin cord, a silvery cord, like it's even talked about in the Bible, a thin silvery cord. And that cord will stretch infinitely. So if you astral project or if you're dreaming, you go different places, there's always this cord attached from your perispirit to your body. Only when you're dead and your perispirit leaves your body, that is your message to your body to start decomposing, right? And that's when you're truly dead, is when your perispirit leaves it. So I don't know what the astral projection stories were, but if you read about Spiritism, you read about different, areas of heaven and hell and the lower zone, then I would think you can infer to yourself how correct they were. I mean, you can see a lot of different things in these different areas. And let me bring up, so the book that I usually recommend for people, oh, I hit the wrong thing, sorry, is the first book in my series, Heaven and Below, which talks about heaven, the lower zone, and then the dark abyss. And I also talk about Jesus Christ in heaven and how he is our not only our governor of the planet, who's actually from billions of years ago helped form the planet, helped guide the evolution. He's much more than that nice, wonderful, loving carpenter on earth. That was just a manifestation of him. And so therefore I talk about that. And then in my second book, if you want to know more about the spirit world itself, is Spirits in the Spirit Universe, which talk about, okay, what are you as a spirit? What are your attributes? How do you graduate as a spirit? Because you go through educational centers. When you're a spirit, when you go to heaven, if you're not in the lower zone or something, so I'm talking about levels of heaven here around the earth. It's, you don't just sit there and lay on the beach for the rest of your life, right? It's, you still work, you still learn. And if you want to ascend in higher and higher levels of heaven, you have to go to school, you have to learn things, you have to learn about the spirit world itself, all that. So I don't know how much what I'm telling you coincides with these stories, but I hope they do, because you'll see a lot of them too. So I tell you about how a spirit improves and all that. So there's a lot to do of being a spirit and how you learn in everything. And then the third and the last book in the series is, let me find that, How We Are Guided by Spirits. So I talk about, what are we told by spirits, how they guide our personal life, how the spirit world guides us as a collective, nations, companies, groups, organizations, how they've guided the earth, and then when we've gotten to be technologically advanced but not morally advanced, they've just said, okay, no, gotta reset. They did that to Atlantis and Lemuria. And a kind of example of that is the Roman Empire, right? It was very technologically advanced. We know how much we lost when we went to the Dark Ages, and they just brought them down. And they said, okay, well, we took the people of the Roman Empire, and they wanted to be powerful and wealthy, didn't care about anybody. And so we said, we took them out of this, stopped making them generals, and we put them on the plow and put them back to nature so they could learn, a thing or two about humility. So that's what happens to us. So in ending, I just want to say is we're not here on earth to be rich, to be powerful, to dominate other people. We're here to learn to change our character and our attitude. And the best way of changing that and motivating ourselves for that is to understand, this is why I'm talking here, is to understand about the spirit world and about why we are here. We are here on the campus called Earth, so we can learn how to reform our character and personality for the better, and to deprioritize that which is not really important. And I'm not saying, that, go give all your money away or be a burden on your kids or whatever. But I'm saying is make family and friends, right, important, and take time for yourself to study, pray, and meditate. It doesn't have to be spiritism. It can be any spiritually thing you want. I believe spiritism supplies a lot, and it can tell you a lot of things. So anyways, I hope this helps everybody. And then I just had a question from, there we go. So one is, I talk about, so here's this, I just watched the video of addiction, and I have been addicted to alcohol and I don't know how to overcome it. And so let me tell you about addiction and so forth. So, but first let me say, on How to Live, on this book, so on my series of 3 books, I talk about the spirit world, what it's about. So it kind of gives you this information. On my book, How to Live Inner Peace with Spiritism, I really talk about how to spiritually ascend. And it's based on a poem from the Spirit Andre Luis. It's a 24-verse poem, very short verse. And what he says is kind of a stepways to help you rise above and be a better person and spiritually ascend in your life. Now, I talk about addiction in my book, The Problem is the Solution, 7 Life Complications to Test and Teach You. And so, so Alcoholics Anonymous is actually a very good place, because they know you have to be spiritually, you have to invest spiritually into yourself to overcome addiction. So let me tell you the rough part of addiction right now. There are spirits all around us, and there are spirits who were addicts when they were still alive, and there are spirits who like let's say, the effects of alcohol. And so when you drink a lot of alcohol, you'll have other spirits putting into your mind, oh, it's time for a drink. Let's get a drink. They'll put that thought into your mind, and you'll take a drink, and then they'll just feel the fumes of that drink into themselves. So they're no help for you to cure yourself of your addiction. They actually are a negative force, because they want you to keep doing that, because they want to sidle up to you. And that's why you need to be spiritually advanced to help get your conscience and filter out those stupid ideas. Because if you filter everything through your conscience and you let your conscience lead you, so if you make any decision where you feel a little bit stressed, a little bit like, I don't think I should do that, don't do it. Now, when you pray and meditate and you ask for help, help will be given to you. Now, what happens to a lot of people, and this is, Spiritism tells us this, is that people who become addicted, and what will happen to them is that a lot of them had come to Earth from a more advanced planet. And I know I wasn't, because for some reason it never affected me much. But for people who come from an advanced planet, the cruelty and chaos of the planet Earth is just too much for them. And some of them will then try to retreat into addiction. And so that's another thing maybe you might want to understand about yourself, is that you're on this planet Earth probably for the first time after you've been on a much better planet, because you probably did something that the spirit world thought, I think we need to take you back a step and have you learn something. And now you're here and you go, well, this is a cruel planet. People are mean to me. People don't work together. And it's a bit hard to handle. So I know I wasn't much help, and I apologize for that. But here's another good comment. It goes, I was an alcoholic and I reached bottom. I begged for help. I quit. Then I had a spiritual awakening. I continue to rise until I die. Either go up or down or up. The choice is ours. So again, I think, it's hard. It's, an addiction is really hard. And spiritual help is it's just so important for that. It's so important. And And here's another from Angel M, because that's true. I'm all alone. So that's hard. And people feel lonely on this earth. When you're in the spirit world and your mind, right, you connect everybody. You can read, everybody can read your thoughts. You can read their thoughts. You feel this connection. And the reason we're put on a planet like we are is to isolate ourselves so that stimuli can come our way so that we can make the adjustments in our character and our personality. That's why in our kind of our physical body simulator, that's how the kind of the big matrix of the spirit world works. We're really like a horse with the blinders on, because even spirit world said we can only see about 1/8 of the world around us. So as a spirit, we could feel other thoughts coming to us. We feel the good feelings of people around us, but on earth, it's tougher. And that's why if you can step back and you can kind of rise above that and say, okay, I'm here for this time. I'm going through something really hard right now, but in the space of immortality, it's not much. And then the more you understand, that the things you have to work on, or what happens to you, good things happen to bad people, bad things happen to good people. It's all for a purpose. It's not this chaotic cruelty. There's always a purpose for it. And it's hard to understand sometimes. And here is this, it is possible to have the power to give other people psychic attacks unwillingly. Yes. Is it possible? Like something out of control, or perhaps like being an energy vampire, aware and not happy about it? And the answer is yes. And in fact, I talk about that in my book, Spirits in the Spirit Universe, and how spirits are guided to you. And there's actually lower spirits that will go to school on how to affect incarnate human beings. And I don't want to take too much time up here, but what they'll do is they'll find your central theme. Are you a cruel person? Are you a miser? Are you sarcastic like I used to be? And then they'll get other spirits around and they'll feed your own thoughts, and they'll kind of change them a little bit, and they'll feed your own thoughts at you, and it'll become kind of a negative feedback loop to give you, bad thoughts, bad feelings. And that's why I tell people, you've got to pray and meditate. You've got to ask for help and get your mind on something else. If you start finding yourself obsessed with something, you've got to change it. And that's where, when you start hearing things that you don't like, you're filtering everything through your conscience, then you're getting bad advice from ignorant spirits. And that's why it's really important to recognize that. Okay, another comment here. Oh. Okay, looks like I didn't get another message. I thought there was another message. Okay, I should have, I'm getting a lot of questions, so I should have one of these days, I should just have Ask Me Anything. Oh wait, here's the one I wanted to show. So another one is, it works. I'm a testimony to it. So we talk about spiritual help. All I can do is offer you an uplifting help. Ask for help and work harder each day, and slowly you will rise. You are not alone. So we'll show another one. And an angel says, what about seeing numbers every day? I see 222, 111, 666, all triple numbers every day for the last year. So everyone says, numbers mean different things. And that could just be, I'm not into, a lot of people say there's into these messages. And the fact I talk about the number 666 in the Bible, which, they say is the mark of the beast. And actually, what 666 is if you take the names, and I've forgotten them in Latin, you take the names of the Pope, the 5 names of the Pope, and you rearrange the letters within the words, like they'll come out to the number. I actually have a YouTube video on it if you want to look it up, 666. So I don't know for you what the numbers mean. It's just like dreams. And I talk about dreams is that we live in a three-dimensional world, and the spirit plane is more like a four. There's no, there's no time. Time is different. You see past, present, and future of things. And therefore, it's really when you think you see symbols and what's going on, it's probably your mind getting confused of those symbols. It's probably your mind like misinterpreting that. But what's important about it is your feeling. If you went to a place and you talked to people and you felt good, even though you're like, what does pink elephant mean, or something like that, right? And you felt good about it, you're probably in a good place. And hopefully the message was positive. And the spirits also say is that you will then have an intuition of what you should know later on, after you wake up a week later, a couple of days later, or whatever. So I do not, I think, so each of these things are about us personally. And so that I cannot tell you what these triple numbers mean. So I would just say is pray and meditate. And the important thing about praying and meditate is pick the same time. Let's say pick 5 o'clock Tuesdays, right? That's when I have my live stream, but 5 o'clock Tuesdays, and keep that same time. Just don't do it for hours, like just 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Get your mind open. And at first you won't feel anything, but what will happen is, and ask for help. What will happen is the good spirits will know, oh, okay, this person prays and meditates for help every week on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern time. They will start coming to you, and they will start giving you more messages and giving you inspiration and giving you help. But be patient, but it does work. So, God bless everybody here. And I just want to say thank you. And again, hit the bell, hit the like, please subscribe to this channel. Go to my site, nwspiritism.com. I have my books on the right-hand side. Hopefully that can help you. The Spirits book. I have the Spirits book. I have it in audio form now. I also have each chapter in on my YouTube channel. If you look up and you go to my YouTube channel and you look at my playlist, the Spirits book is that will be there. Okay, I'll get another question. Is it possible to hear spirits like close whispers next to your ear? Yes. And some translucent oscillation-like shapes? Yes, it is. And if you're doing that, then I really recommend you read Allan Kardec's The Book of Mediumship, The Book of Mediums. And it's available in PDF. So just type in Allan Kardec, right? Space PDF, and it'll show you all his books on PDF. And so you need to learn about what you're hearing and seeing and how they can affect you, because there are wonderful guardian angels, high spirits that will give you all sorts of good advice. And then there's a lot of people spirits that just like to play with you, and some that want you to do stupid stuff. So you should, I would get that book. I would read it. You can read Domains of Mediumship by Francisco C. Xavier, and it was by the Spirit Henri Louise, talking about mediumship. So you may want to explore that. You actually might want to talk about books. Go to my site, nwspiritism.com, and in the search, put books on mediumship, and I have an article somewhere about list of books that you can mostly get for free on PDF on books on mediumship. So if you're doing that, then you need to be better educated. I would really recommend that. Okay. I think that is about all I don't want to take up everybody's time. I'm almost an hour now. Okay. So anyway, I had another message there, but somehow I can't get to it on this line. So I apologize for someone with the last message, and I want to say, God bless you. Come to my Sunday night program at 5 p.m. Eastern. And let's talk some more. This has been very fruitful. God bless everyone.